This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. Coming up on the show, the Mandani effect. Nearly 1 million New Yorkers are reportedly ready to flee New York City. A devastating new poll for the Democrats shows 70% of Americans think the party is out of touch. Donald Trump instructs the Department of War to prepare for possible action to respond to the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. And an explosive report reveals the BBC doctored a speech by Donald Trump, misleading viewers. Also, we'll cross to London for the latest on the royals as the fallout over Andrew Mountbatten Windsor continues. Joining us now is President and founder of Strelmark, Hilary Fordwich. Hilary, it's great to see you. In news that should shock absolutely no one, the Democrat brand is toxic, and the majority of Americans believe the party is out of touch. Who would have thought? This new poll has found that 70% of Americans now view the Democrat Party as out of touch, and the survey found that the party is perceived as being overly focused on protecting the rights of undocumented immigrants and protecting the rights of LGBTQ plus Americans while alienating voters who care more about secure borders and crime reduction. Hilary, the polls are showing that over more time, more and more people are coming to this conclusion about the Democrats.
Well, thank you for having me back again, Gabriella. A pleasure. I would actually say this gives me the faith in what actually President Nixon referred to as the silent majority. A lot of people, they don't go out and protest. You don't see them rioting, but really what they care about is they care about their own, in America referred to as pocketbook issues. In English, we'd say handbag, but their wallet issues, their family, stability in terms of finances, then their safety, their family safety, their town safety, and their jobs, which ties back into the financial issues. All these side issues and transgender issues, etc. No, they're not the priority. So this poll actually confirms, I think, something good, which is Americans remain solid and sane. And last but not least, remember, I believe it was Winston Churchill who said, I have the faith in Americans to eventually do the right thing after they've tried everything else.
With the exception of New York City, though, because the new face of the Democrats is now likely going to win the votes of New Yorkers today as they head to the polls in the mayoral race. And Democrat socialist Zohran Mamdani looks set to win. Now, Donald Trump was asked about Mamdani during his 60 Minutes interview.
Zohran Mamdani, 34-year-old Democratic socialist. He's the
communist, not socialist, communist. He's far worse than a socialist.
Some people have compared him to a left-wing version of you, charismatic, breaking the old rules. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I'm a much better looking person than him, right?
Love him or hate him, he is hilarious. But Hilary, we've covered for some time now that Mamdani is as radical and far left as it gets. He's been running his campaign promising to make New York City affordable. But Hilary, I really want to talk about the consequences for New York City if Mamdani gets in. There's so much to cover here. We can start with the police. I mean, Mamdani has previously called to defund the police. He's called police officers racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety. He has since apologised for those comments because he had to. But right now, the number of police officers is at its lowest level in New York City in 20 years, below 34,000. Morale is low, and of course it is. And he's been running his campaign promising free buses, rent freezes, which is of course going to be a disaster. I mean, people will be refusing to move out. The vacancy rate will get tighter. Developers will obviously be avoiding building new housing. Landlords won't be upgrading buildings anytime soon. And there's also the fact that Mamdani doesn't have a lot of experience. No real experience in governance, in business, law, finance, running a large organisation. He says that he wants to increase taxes on the wealthy, even though the top 1% of city taxpayers provide 48% of the city's personal income tax revenue. And there are reports today, Hilary, that almost 1 million people are preparing to flee New York City. Almost 1 million.
Oh, yes, Gabriella, you're totally right with everything that you just mentioned. You painted a ghastly picture and you're totally correct. Nearly a million, that's literally the size. I'm in Washington, D.C. That's literally the size of Washington, D.C. leaving. And of course, as you indicated, who's going to leave? The poor aren't leaving. The people that leave will be the people that pay the taxes to fund the programs that he purports that he says he's going to do. First of all, what he says he's going to do is totally and utterly unrealistic. He doesn't run the MTA, which is the transit system, so he can't give the free buses. That's not under his purview. He isn't in control of the rent control either. He doesn't own the real estate either. So a lot of what he promises is absolutely, completely and utterly out of his control, and that's ridiculous. Also, give me anybody who's ever left a capitalist country and moved to a socialistic country. It just really doesn't happen. Socialism fails everywhere that it's ever been tried. And the only places where sort of a version of socialism succeeds, like, for example, in the Nordic countries, I actually lived in Amsterdam, lived in Holland. I headed global business development for KPMG there. And the difference there, Gabriella, is the Dutch, very hardworking people. Everybody works. I remember when actually my first son was born, neighbors came to give me a gift for the baby. But they said, oh, when somebody doesn't work and they've hurt their back, we come to bring them food. But we also check that their back is really hurt because we don't want them getting benefits if they don't really need it, because the Dutch check on each other. This is what they do. They're all very hardworking. It's the Viking mentality that if somebody is injured, everybody else has to row in the boat. What Mandani is predicting is that he will just give handouts to people that don't do anything. Last but not least, with regard to the grocery stores, when he says about the government subsidized groceries, all the bodegas won't be able to compete. All of those that were founded by immigrants, the small bodegas, they will not be able to compete. Why? They will not be paying rent. The government ones won't be paying rent. They will be subsidized. So you'll drive out, in addition to everything you said, it'll drive out all of the regular grocery stores.
It's been revealed Barack Obama had a lengthy phone call with Mandani over the weekend and offered to be a sounding board, and Obama praised Mandani for his campaign, according to the New York Times. Now, we've seen Mandani being backed by Bernie Sanders and AOC, but it's interesting to see Mandani seems to have been able to win over voters through his social media strategy by posting videos and using influencers, and that has cut through Hillary.
Well, absolutely. And that's why it explains the younger voters are predominantly predicted to vote for him, at least in the current polling. It is older voters that aren't as obviously frequently using the social media. So he has done, actually, I would compliment him and his team, brilliant job with social media. But these clips are exciting and they promise a lot. It's kind of like saying it's going to be Christmas every day for everyone. But yeah, again, who's going to fund it? As Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is you run out of spending other people's money.
Correct. Well, another Democrat that's going all in with her social media strategy, except this one I think is absolutely bizarre, is Gavin Newsom, who in the space of a minute says that he hates politicians who lie, only to go on to say that Joe Biden's cognitive health was fantastic.
Nothing I dislike more than the politician that sits there and lies to you. And we all just sit there rolling our eyes going, give me a break.
Did you legitimately believe that he was capable of serving as president until January of 2029?
There was nothing to suggest what you just said or others have suggested in terms of my interaction. That's all I can be accountable for.
I mean, when you think of a slippery, lying politician, in America, you think of Gavin Newsom instantly. I mean, he lies about the reservoirs being full during the LA fires at the start of the year. He's been flip-flopping on trans issues, like whether men can play in women's sports. And he's now putting on different accents depending on what podcast he's on. Hillary, what's your assessment of Gavin Newsom there?
Oh, yes. I loved it when he was talking about literally almost as if he grew up in a ghetto as a boy. And then the next thing you saw was there's a problem is photographs don't lie and facts are stubborn things. There was a photograph of him with a Burberry scarf when he first went to university.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Gavin, you have a short memory. But also, I think that next to liars, I think one other thing that the public doesn't have much tolerance for are hypocrites. There was a scene during COVID where the entire state had to wear face masks, and he was pictured at the French Laundry very close with all his donors there at a comfy, cozy dinner without a face mask. So, no, I think that he's a liar. He is a liar. He has, not for me to say he's a liar. Photographs have proved that he has lied in certain instances, and also he's a hypocrite. And that's something that I think that nationally, the American voters have very little tolerance for, and rightly so.
Absolutely. Now, finally, Donald Trump was asked about ICE and if ICE agents potentially going too far during his interview with 60 Minutes.
Have some of these raids gone too far?
No, I think they haven't gone far enough because we've been held back by the judges, by the liberal judges that were put in by Biden and by Obama.
You're okay with those tactics?
Yeah, because you have to get the people out. You know, you have to look at the people. Many of them are murderers. Many of them are people that were thrown out of their countries because they were, criminals.
Donald Trump declaring his ICE has not gone far enough. Now, DHS has deported around 500,000 illegal aliens since the start of Trump's second term, and more than 1.6 million have voluntarily self-deported. But Hillary, there's more to go.
Oh, yes, there are. And President Trump is really correct there, Gabriella, because it has been proven that in many of these countries, they have literally emptied out their jails. It's not like they're sending their best and their brightest. They don't want those that are making great incomes and taxes. And somebody who lives a lovely, comfy, professional, upstanding life isn't going to lead and could go across the border with nothing to do this. So, yes, it's the dregs of society that have come. And many of them, a great percentage of them, not only are criminals, but they're fighting age men, which is ghastly. And what I would say is to all of those Democrats that are defending all of these illegals, why don't they take them into their homes then?
Well said. It's a fair point. President and founder of Strellmark, Hillary Fordwich, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, Gabriella. Thank you.
If you're a homeowner in America, you need to listen to this. The FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud on the rise called title theft, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on a single document using a fake notary stamp and file it with the county. And just like that, on record, they own your home. Using your ownership, they can take out loans against your equity or even sell your property, and you won't know about it until foreclosure or collection notices show up in the mail. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock so you can protect your equity and find out today if you're already a victim. Use my promo code POWER at hometitlelock.com and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title records, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud occurs, their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix it. Don't be a victim. Protect your equity today. That's hometitlelock.com, promo code POWER, or use the link below. The persecution of Christians in Nigeria has reached crisis levels, with thousands of Christians being slaughtered. US President Donald Trump is now instructing the Department of War for possible action. Joining us now is Bernard Tutunji, National Director of the Aid to the Church in Need Australia and New Zealand. Bernard, thank you so much for joining us to talk to us about what's happening in Nigeria. Christians, of course, are being slaughtered and Islamist militants are reportedly burning down villages. And recently a pastor made this desperate plea for the president to step in, a warning that this vision is distressing.
United Nations, I know you're watching it. American Senate, you are watching what I'm doing, I'm saying here. Special advisor to Trump, now, please tell Trump to save our life in Nigeria. They are killing Christians in Nigeria.
It's horrific to see that vision, to hear the reports of what's coming out of Nigeria. Can you shed some light on what's happening there?
Look, what that pastor's saying, it's sheer desperation, because this isn't a new situation. This isn't ever a fragile situation that's about to get worse. It's as bad as it can almost get. And so they're in such a state where they'll go to sleep one night. They don't know if they're going to wake up the morning, if their village is going to be ransacked. So it is just this desperation where you reach out and you just call for those who might be able to do something. And I know we've seen the president come out recently to say a few things, and I think that, maybe gives some hope and maybe has some chance to wake up the world a little bit to what's going on.
Let's talk about what Donald Trump has said. He's announced that the US will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria if its government continues to essentially allow the killings of Christians. He wrote on Truth Social that the US may even go into Nigeria to, quote, completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists responsible. He posted, "I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians," warning the Nigerian government better move fast. Now, the president was also asked on Air Force One about the situation.
They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria.
And they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
Pete Hegseth has also spoken about this. He shared Donald Trump's Truth Social post and wrote, "Yes, sir, the killing of innocent Christians in Nigeria and anywhere must end immediately. The Department of War is preparing for action. Either the Nigerian government protects Christians or we will kill the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities." Bernard, can I get your reaction to what the President has had to say?
Yeah, look, aid to the church in need, first of all, is not a political commentary foundation. But I think the fact that someone in power and a high level of power has come and said something on a microphone is important. And I don't know, Trump says a lot of things, President Trump says a lot of things, but the importance of saying something is just so vital to the cause, because I think it puts out the fact and it brings it to the headlines to say, you know, this is a situation that cannot continue. And I think the US government is finally, I mean, President Trump had put Nigeria on the watch list of countries of concern. President Biden took it off. It's now back on. I think these are positive moves. And if you're a Christian in Nigeria, you'll take whatever assistance you can get from any world leader to get out of the trouble that you're in.
Well, as you say, Donald Trump designated Nigeria back as a country of particular concern, and he wrote last week on Truth Social that Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands of Christians are being killed. Radical Islamists are responsible for the mass slaughter. I'm hereby making Nigeria a country of particular concern. But that is the least of it. The United States cannot stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria and numerous other countries. We stand ready, willing and able to save our great Christian population around the world. Now, since Donald Trump posted about that, singer Nicki Minaj actually shared Donald Trump's message to her 30 million followers. She wrote, "Reading this made me feel a deep sense of gratitude that we live in a country where we can freely worship God. No group should ever be persecuted for practicing their religion. We don't have to share the same beliefs in order for us to respect each other. Numerous countries all around the world are being affected by this horror, and it is dangerous to pretend we don't notice." Thank you to the President and his team for taking this seriously. God bless every persecuted Christian. Let's remember to lift them up in prayer. Now, it's refreshing to hear more people speak about this, because as we spoke about last time, it barely gets a mention on a lot of mainstream media outlets.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed that last time, and I think I said at the time, you know, Christians and Nigerians or Africans broadly don't get mentioned. It's thankful that shows like this outside the mainstream media cover it, because it needs to be said. And I think, unfortunately, those who really don't maybe hold a faith themselves, or they're not too worried about Christianity as something important, don't worry. But the fact is, if you dismiss the rights of religious freedom, you dismiss the rights of all people, because religious freedom for the believer is just as is needed for the non-believer, because it gives them the rights to believe or not believe. So we need to have this. It's the foundation of our humanity, the ability to believe and not believe. So I think that's, you know, vital, and thank goodness for what's coming up, because I think, I'm not saying whether we go to war or don't go to war, and that's not for me to comment, but really the ability to put it on the table and keep on saying there is a problem here in Nigeria. 4,000 to 6,000 Christians are being killed a year in a conservative number. 2 to 3 million have been displaced from their homes. We wouldn't let that happen anywhere, but we seem to just let it happen there and go on our daily business. It can't go on.
Yeah, the international watchdog group Open Doors reported that nearly 70% of Christians killed last year for their faith were in Nigeria. Groups like Boko Haram, Islamic State West Africa Province and Fulani militants are being blamed for most of the attacks, often targeting Christian farmers. Rights groups estimate that between, as you said, 4,000 to 6,000 being a conservative estimate, some are reportedly even there are reports of up to 8,000 Christian deaths annually. Yet Nigeria's president says that Nigeria stands firmly as a democracy governed by constitutional guarantees of religious liberty. He wrote, "The characterisation of Nigeria as religiously intolerant does not reflect our national reality, nor does it take into consideration the consistent and sincere efforts of the government to safeguard freedom of religion and benefits for all Nigerians. Religious freedom and tolerance have been a core tenet of our collective identity and shall always remain so." What do you make of that statement?
His response is a political response. You know, he talks about constitutional guarantees and religious liberty, as he should, but that's not the experience on the ground. And these Nigerians who are fighting for their life or fighting for their freedom, don't really see that. In Nigeria, there used to be a situation where the vice president and the president, one would be Christian, one would be Muslim, and this went on until 2023. We don't have that now. We have a Muslim ticket. I'm not saying that's at its heart problematic, but it's not a representation of half the population, which is Christian. So they can't buy land to build a church. They can't take on government jobs. There are restrictions on them and the way they live and move. And so the president can say that, and maybe that's, he's doing the best he can at best, but it's not working and it's not enough on the ground because the Christians can't live in that pasture at the very beginning.
Yeah.
It's desperate to be heard, for someone to reach out and do something for them.
The Aid to the Church in Need recently launched its Religious Freedom in the World report. It found that more than 2/3 of humanity, more than 5.4 billion people, are living in countries without full religious freedom. I mean, that's just astonishing. Can you talk to us about this report, some of the threats to religious freedom, and how countries in the West have also seen a sharp rise in hostility towards religion?
Yeah, definitely. 5.4 billion. It's 2/3 of the world's population living in countries that are known for persecution, direct persecution, or at least discrimination against Christians in a major sense. It's a massive number. Unfortunately, it's not new. We've been doing this report for 25 years, every 2 years, and the numbers sort of vary up and down, but generally the trajectory of heading upwards. And it shows basically that often it's an authoritarian sort of government or a jihadist problem that's putting pressure on the people, or a nationalism that's putting pressure on the people to live their faith, to practice their faith. The reports also show stories of hope where people are living through this. They're doing the best they can to live their faith, to live their lives. But I think what the report seeks to do is, much like what we're doing here, is put an advocacy out and remind people that this is a serious problem and that governments need to pay attention, because it's not just a small portion of the population. We can forget that here in Australia. But even you mentioned, this, what we call polite persecution in places, Western countries, in France, in Greece, in Spain, where churches are being bombed or firebombed or vandalised. I mean, the rise of anti-Semitism. It's not just about Christians, it's about people of all faiths really suffering at the hands of multitudes of people under this jihadist authoritarianism or nationalist government and on ideas. And we need to keep putting on the table, we need to keep talking about it to make some traction, make some headway.
Bernard, you were part of a private audience with Pope Leo XIV where the Holy Father was presented with this report. How did the Pope respond?
Yes, it was a great privilege. 25 of us went from Aid to the Church in Need, met the Holy Father. We presented the report to him. This is the first time he had received Aid to the Church in Need. He spoke to us about the importance of religious freedom as a foundation, as a bedrock for all people, whether they be people of faith or not. He encouraged our benefactors and supporters to continue to do this good work and remember that everything we do has an effect on the population of the world to, make our lungs breathe a little bit clearer and to continue to do good work. So he gave us our blessing, he sent us out, and what we try to do now back in our countries is really bring this to the fore, to take opportunities where we can to bring peace about. Everyone wants peace, but peace is not easily come by and you have to actually do things to make it happen. So it was a beautiful opportunity. I think he's right behind us and he definitely wants us to continue to spread that word of bringing peace to people.
Bernard Tatunji, National Director of the Aid to the Church in Need, Australia and New Zealand. Thank you so much for speaking to me today. We really appreciate it. It's time for Media Meltdowns, and woke Hollywood celebrity George Clooney, the one who called on the Democrats to kick and push Joe Biden right out of the race, now says that when he did that, he didn't want Kamala Harris to take over. In fact, that was a big mistake.
We had a chance. I wanted there to be, as I wrote in the op-ed, a primary. Let's battle test this quickly and get it up and going. I think the mistake with it being Kamala is that she had to run against her own record. And it's very hard to do if the point of running is to say, I'm not that person. It's hard to do. And so she was given a very tough task. I think it was a mistake, quite honestly. But we are where we are.
Look at him dancing around the issue, labelling it a mistake. It's certainly not a great endorsement for the former vice president, who is certainly eyeing off another crack at the presidency. Earlier this year, you'd remember Hunter Biden, who was freshly pardoned by his dad, not the auto pen, had this to say about George Clooney.
Him, and everybody around him. I don't have to nice. Number one, I agree with Quentin Tarantino. George Clooney is not a actor. He is a I don't know what he is. He's a brand. And by the way, and God bless him. You know what? He supposedly treats his friends really well. You know what I mean? Buys them things. And he's got a really great place in Lake Como. And he's great friends with Barack Obama. You. What do you have to do with anything? Why do I have to listen to you? What right do you have to step on a man who's given 52 years of his life to the service of this country and decide that you, George Clooney, are going to take out basically a full-page ad in the New York Times to me and James Carville, who hasn't run a race in 40 years?
And it seems as though the two haven't patched things up. George Clooney has called Hunter Biden a liar.
Did you see Hunter Biden's reaction?
Yeah, I saw it.
What did you make of it?
Well, I could spend a lot of time debunking many of the things he said, because many of the things he said were just outright lies. You know, Obama didn't put me up to it. It wasn't my fundraiser. It was my fundraiser. All the things. But the reality is, I don't think looking backwards like that is helpful to anyone, particularly to him. I don't think it's helpful for the Democratic Party. And so I'm just going to wish him well on his ongoing recovery, and I hope he does well, and just leave it at that. I have many personal opinions about it, but I don't find it to be helpful to have a public spat with him. So.
Joining us now is writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku. Esther, thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of George Clooney there? Firstly, saying it was a mistake to have Kamala Harris running, but also claiming that Hunter Biden is a liar. Well, of course he is, we all know that, so is his dad. But he wouldn't criticise Hunter Biden any further than what he already did because that's not helpful to the Democrats. I mean, thank you, George Clooney. What's your assessment of all of that?
Well, I'd like to transport us to a parallel universe where anyone cares what George Clooney thinks about anything, really. This man who's literally paid to play pretend. The level of narcissism you see among celebrities like this is almost radioactive. It could fill out the whole state of Kentucky, because these are not endocrinologists or oncologists or astronauts. They're people that literally get paid a fortune, an arm and a leg to play pretend. But let's do what he does and act like he's a kingmaker. Do you recall his op-ed that he wrote in the New York Times before the election, urging Joe Biden to step down? And then when he did, a couple of weeks later, he said that this was the biggest sacrifice that's been done to for the country since George Washington. So this was the kind of flowery language that he was using to describe basically Joe Biden doing what he wanted. And now, a year later, he's whinging because the Democrats didn't go as far to give him everything he wanted by primarying a candidate as useless as Kamala Harris, which just screams of a level of arrogance that you just wouldn't believe. But I think one thing that Hunter Biden got right, which is not a phrase I thought I would ever utter in my life, was why should we care what he thinks? Who is George Clooney? Who is this man that thinks that he can throw money about and give his opinion about who should have been primaried or who should have been made the Democratic nominee? As if this is not a country of 340 million people who live vastly different lives to the very gilded cages that these celebrities live in, who don't have net worths that rival that of small countries, who have to live with the consequences of voting for people that these individuals endorse. So in one way, it's interesting to see kind of this Hunter George Clooney spat, and George Clooney kind of feigning the esteemed royal that's going to look down on a subject and not even dignify his expletive response to him with a reply. But on the other hand, it just shows the level of narcissism that we see in the Hollywood ranks. And you even see it now with President Obama, who for a long time fancied himself as sort of the kingmaker in the Democratic Party. He's calling Mandani, saying, I can be your sounding board, before the last election, telling black guys not to vote for Donald Trump because you're basically giving up on yourselves, and using all sorts of language that would suggest that they're basically self-hating. I don't even want to go into that. But you have these narcissistic characters in the Democratic Party that are not focused on getting new blood, getting actual talent in the Democratic Party, getting rid of these octogenarians and actually focusing on the issues that people are concerned about, like the economy, like the cost of living, like jettisoning the woke nonsense. You have these people that are just kind of leading a dynastic form of politics that just don't get it.
You're exactly right. I mean, the level of narcissism is astronomical. Esther, I also want to get your thoughts on what's been revealed today, that the BBC doctored Donald Trump's January 6th speech to make it appear as though he was encouraging his supporters to riot in the Capitol. Now, a leaked 19-page dossier, which was shared with The Telegraph by a whistleblower, revealed that a Panorama program broadcast a week before the election last year completely misled viewers by mangling footage. Look at this.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So Panorama, which broadcast its Trump a Second Chance program on October 28 last year, also showed flag-waving men marching on the Capitol directly after Donald Trump spoke. And the dossier found that by mangling footage from the start of Trump's speech with a segment from nearly an hour later, Panorama had made Trump say things he never actually said to make it appear as though he was encouraging riots. Now, this has led to the resignation of one controller at BBC. Donald Trump Jr. has posted about this, blasting the BBC, calling it fake news, saying that the fake news reporters in the UK are just as dishonest as the ones here in America. Esther, it's absolutely shocking, but it doesn't surprise me. Can I get your reaction?
It doesn't surprise me at all. And as we speak, in the next few weeks, I'm going to have another quarterly payment come out of my bank account for the BBC license fee, which I am obligated to pay, unfortunately. But this is the stuff of basically, this is the kind of stuff that has basically tanked the BBC's reputation. Now, the fact that this dossier, this 19-page dossier, was actually made known to the BBC's own ethics and standards watchdog, which is comprised of Tim Davie, who basically runs the BBC, and yet nothing was done about it. It just goes to show the level of institutional rots that we're looking at and the culture of bias that has been allowed to take root in the BBC. Now, if you know anything about how the BBC functions, and if you know more broadly about journalism in the UK, you know the kinds of people that can afford to even get a BBC internship tend to be from kind of plush neighborhoods, from very good schools in and around London. They and their families tend to have a certain political ilk or leaning. And this kind of ideology, this kind of cushy luxury belief class of the left-wing metropolitan elite has basically filtered its way through the BBC ranks. So much so that if you talk to people that do BBC shows in the UK, panel shows, debate shows and all of that, and when they get a call from a producer basically asking them their thoughts on the topic, you probably come away knowing the thoughts of the producer as well, and is probably not going to be agreeing with you if it in any way leans away from the anti-Brexit, anti-Farage, anti-conservative point of view. So this is unsurprising. I mean, we've seen so many gaffes from the BBC over the years. The fact that they refuse to call Hamas a terrorist group, even though they are a designated terrorist group in the UK by the British government, which is just completely astonishing. The documentary that BBC Panorama did about how to survive a war zone in Gaza, when they found out that the narrator was a Hamas official's son. All these sorts of things that have come out from the BBC that have been poorly handled. You know, the Hugh Edwards scandal, which was probably one of the most disgraceful things that's happened to the BBC. The fact that they let this man who was soliciting child pornography just keep his job at the BBC, and in obvious fashion with the rest of our judicial system, he basically got a slap on the wrist and a few months of a suspended sentence, which is just disgusting. But these are the kinds of things that have been coming out of the BBC that doesn't surprise anyone. I suspect there's going to be a bit of panic in Westminster because the BBC's Royal Charter is up in 2027. And we know that Lisa Nandy, the minister who heads up these sorts of affairs, has said that nothing is off the table. You have people that are seeing their license fees go up and are wondering, why am I paying this? I don't even watch the BBC. Their own watchdog can't even keep them in check. The fact that this was submitted to their own watchdog and nothing happened, and this was allowed to circulate, it's vile. And in the case of this Donald Trump video, I mean, the fact that it was completely misleading is linked to the fact that he wasn't even facing federal charges for actually inciting violence, because it clearly wasn't true. They took a clip that was 2 clips 15 minutes apart in this man's speech, and try to make it look like he directly incited violence on January the 6th, which doesn't really get much lower than that, if you ask me.
No, it certainly doesn't. The TDS is just on another level. Now, I want to turn to this horrific incident that occurred in the UK over the weekend with this mass stabbing on a train. British prosecutors have now charged a 32-year-old man with 10 counts of attempted murder after this mass stabbing on a train bound for London that left multiple passengers injured. Now, Anthony Williams has been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder and other charges. But also, Esther, a train driver is being hailed a hero after he helped save passengers during this knife attack. Andrew Johnson, he's a Royal Navy and Iraq War veteran. What more can you tell us?
Yes, this man, the footage has been released of his complete act of heroism, and how he ushered people off the train, and how his quick thinking allowed the train to be diverted to a station that allowed British police to get on board and tackle this man. I mean, the story is harrowing and not surprising, but really quite horrifying in the sense that it feels like nothing and nowhere is safe in the UK anymore. This particular train, to my horror, is a train that I've taken for 15 years. It's the direct train line that goes to where I live in the UK. And so, it's one of those things that makes you think, where is safe? And unfortunately, what I've noticed is this is now becoming a pattern. So many people might not be familiar with this, but back in 2023, there was a man, a black British male by the name of Valdo Calacane, who went on a stabbing spree in Nottingham and killed 3 people, including 2 university students, because the voices in his head were telling him to. Now, this was in the aftermath of the fact that he went down to London in the weeks prior to MI5, and was literally standing outside the building begging them to arrest him because, again, the voices in his head were telling him to. And then you fast forward to last year, you'll probably remember the summer riots in Southport here in the UK, which were triggered by the fact that what the police misled us by saying it was a Welsh choir boy, which ended up actually being Axel Rudakabana, a black British national of Ugandan heritage. He went on to stab and kill 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport, even though he was known to the authorities. He had a history of mental health issues and severe antisocial behavior. Social workers couldn't even go to this young man's house without a police escort. Wow. And yet that was allowed to happen. And now we're seeing this man as well, Anthony Williams, who's another black British male who got on a train and stabbed 10 people. Thankfully, no one has died. But what we're seeing here is a trend of individuals that are slipping through the cracks. Now, we obviously have a knife crime epidemic in the UK, but what we're also seeing is public health officials that don't really want to tailor public health policy towards a particular demographic that has a higher incidence rate of these kinds of mental illnesses. Most people don't know that in the UK, black young males are 6 to 9 times more likely to suffer from schizophrenia than the general population. Now, when you look at this group that makes up only 2% of the British population, that's actually quite significant. And you have to have public health policies that's open about this, but also tailors the treatment towards it. So these people that are presenting a higher risk of these kinds of incidents and psychosis are dealt with. This coupled with the increasing use of cannabis, which we know can induce psychotic episodes, and you have a perfect recipe for disaster. So it's kind of coupled with the fact that the British state just doesn't have the resources to protect the British public anymore, that we know. And also public health officials are failing the public by not tailoring our healthcare towards reducing this level of threat by targeting these groups that pose a higher level of threat with this regard, which is completely baffling to me, to be honest.
And people are getting injured. No, it's horrific to watch. Finally, Esther, last time we spoke about the polls in the UK, where, of course, reform is well ahead. Over in France now, Macron's approval rating has dropped to a historic low of, wait for it, 11%, making him the most unpopular French president in 70 years. Wow. Talk to us about this.
Well, most people would say that he's a 2-term president, so it's kind of the natural ebbs and flows of political opinion. But Macron has achieved something that even his predecessor, François Hollande, didn't manage to, which is, even though they were both polled at around 11%, the actual personal animosity towards his person is much higher than Hollande. People don't just disagree with Macron's policies or his work as president. They dislike him deeply as a person. And contrary to popular belief, this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that there is this campaign trying to establish that his wife is indeed a man, which she is not. He's just a deeply unpopular president because well, one of the most recent reasons is because of the snap election he called last year, which has basically left France rudderless, without leadership and without a budget. And in many Frenchmen opinion, this has made France a laughing stock. You know, the country is completely gridlocked. Nothing is happening. I mean, the only silver lining that Macron can say is that at least his popularity ratings, while still not great, are not as bad as Keir Starmer's, who's hovering somewhere around, wait for it, -40.
Wow, it doesn't get much worse than that. Esther Kraku, thank you so much for your time. Great to speak with you.
Thank you.
Joining us now is royal commentator Josh Rom. Josh, it's great to see you again. Extraordinary news with Buckingham Palace announcing that Prince Andrew is being stripped of his titles, including Prince. So he is, of course, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and he's agreed to vacate his Windsor estate after losing the support of his former wife, Sarah Ferguson. Josh, there is so much to unpack. I can't wait for you to bring us right up to speed with what is happening with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and, of course, Fergie, who intends to make her own plans now.
Yes, that's right. So Prince Andrew, well, the Prince, the Andrew formerly known as Prince, I should say. So Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, who will therefore be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has been ordered to vacate Royal Lodge. Of course, this comes under absolutely intense public pressure after his living arrangements, the peppercorn rent, the lease, all came under intense scrutiny following both the allegations from Virginia Giuffre, as explained in her novel, the alleged 3 sexual acts, or the 3 times that she alleges that she had, that her and Prince Andrew, 3 alleged incidents in the book, basically. And of course, Prince Andrew was caught out lying in that bombshell BBC Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis over when exactly he cut contact with Jeffrey Epstein. He of course said that he cut contact in 2010. Then emails were exposed saying where he said, "We're in this together, we'll play soon." Pretty damning evidence there. So, you know, Prince Andrew being humiliated in the biggest way possible, having not just his royal titles, not just the Duke of York title, not just the Earl of Inverness, but the very title, the very Prince title, his birthright being stripped from him now. Buckingham Palace releasing that bombshell statement saying that he will be moving to alternative accommodation privately funded by his brother, His Majesty the King, on the Sandringham estate. I'm predicting a very sad existence for Prince Andrew, a much more quiet existence. Yes, he'll be able to play golf. Yes, he'll be able to go on holidays, but I'm not sure these shooting weekends will necessarily happen in the future. You know, his very purpose in life, that birthright purpose in life, has been completely stripped from him in an unprecedented way, in the most public way possible. His life is now going to be reduced to a very privileged hermit.
I think you're right. Now, what about Princess Beatrice and Eugenie? They've, of course, fled the UK and are reportedly barely holding it together, Josh.
Yes, that's right. Both of them have fled the UK. Princess Beatrice, I think she's been spotted with a business economic initiative in Saudi Arabia. So, and actually, Princess Beatrice has been smiling for the pictures. Of course, both Beatrice and Eugenie will both actually carry on. They will still hold both their princess titles and their York titles as well. So actually they're very different from Prince Andrew and of course his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson, who is understood now. I originally predicted that she would stay with Prince Andrew. Now she's reportedly been telling sources close to her and friends that actually she's making alternative arrangements. I think when Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson were living in that 30-room, that expansive Royal Lodge residence on the Grand Windsor estate, you know, they had separate areas. There was enough space to keep their distance. Now, with Prince Andrew probably going to be moving into a much smaller, probably more sparse accommodation on the Sandringham estate, that separation, even though that they've been living together since their divorce, it's going to be a very different existence. But Princess Beatrice and Eugenie, you know, it must be so tough for them, because notwithstanding the fact that Prince Andrew still denies all allegations of wrongdoing, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie are completely innocent. They've had absolutely nothing to do with it. They have no responsibilities over their parents. They're just trying to get on with their lives, their own careers, while still maintaining some sort of connection with the royal family to appear on certain public events when required. This must be deeply embarrassing for them. So, and whilst actually Princess Eugenie is actually on a girls' weekend in Paris, trying to let her hair down, you know, both of them, I think they're just trying to carry on with their lives, whilst, you know, it must be deeply embarrassing for the princesses, for their parents to be engulfed in huge scandal.
Now, Prince William and Princess Catherine have reportedly moved into their new Forest Lodge home in Windsor with their 3 children, which means they'll be closer to Andrew ahead of his departure. Also, Josh, Prince William and Princess Catherine have also reportedly thrown a party for the workmen who helped them move into Forest Lodge sooner than expected. Is that right? Also reports that they're very keen for a bit of a fresh start.
Absolutely, they're keen for a fresh start. So you might remember that in 2022, they moved into Adelaide Cottage, a 4-bedroom residence on the Windsor Castle estate, a much smaller residence than Royal Lodge. Of course, they still have Amner Hall, their huge country home, and their official London residence is still apartment 1A in Kensington Palace. However, of course, with Princess Catherine's cancer diagnosis and getting over that, undertaking the preventative chemotherapy treatment, they're now moving into their forever home. Now, the Prince and Princess of Wales were meant to move in to Forest Lodge after Christmas. However, they brought their plans forward, and actually they've spent the school half term settling into their new home with their 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. And yes, they did, as a gesture of thank you to the workmen who were working around the clock to try and get them in early. They moved their plans forward. They threw, as reports suggested, a thank you party for the workmen at the private members York Club pub, which is a members-only pub specifically for the residents and employees of the Crown Estate in Windsor. So this was a real nice gesture of thank you after bringing their plans forward. Workmen working around the clock, wanting to get them into what's been deemed by sources close to the Prince and Princess of Wales as their forever home. Now, this is an 8-bedroom mansion, grade 2 listed, built in the 18th century, very different from Adelaide Cottage, which is far smaller than their new Forest Lodge.
And Prince William has arrived in Rio de Janeiro to mark year 5 of his Earthshot Prize. It's arguably the most important week of the year for the future king. And Prince Harry, he's announced a trip to Canada to meet with veterans, members of the armed forces, community and military charities. Yet it's interesting, Josh, this was announced just minutes after Prince William kicked off his stay in Rio de Janeiro for the welcome ceremony. What do you make of the timing here?
Yes, but it's very suspicious timing. Let's just say Harry has a little bit of a history with this. So for the second Earthshot Prize, we're in Boston. When that was going on, Harry and Meghan, of course, dropped the trailer for their Netflix documentary reality series. For the third Earthshot Prize in Singapore, Harry delivered a keynote message at the Stand Up for Heroes benefit. At the fourth Earthshot Prize in Cape Town, Harry then made a rare appearance at the Tillman Honours Gala in Chicago. So Harry has a bit of history when it comes to trying to, quote unquote, maybe overshadow his brother, trying to draw attention away because, of course, the Earthshot Prize is combating climate change. This is something that Prince William is so passionate about. And after this, he's going to be attending the COP30 conference alongside the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Now, what is very interesting, so this tour that Harry's announced, it's going to be a big tour of Toronto in Canada. He's going to meet veterans, members of the armed forces, military charities. Now, his spokesperson has said that this visit is 2 months in the making, in the planning, and it marks obviously a big return to the city since the Invictus Games were held there back in 2017. Now, what his spokesperson has also said, they did actually comment on the exact timing of this announcement, saying that this was quote unquote unavoidable due to Harry being stripped of his security, claiming that the period of time in which Harry and Meghan can release details of their events is much more truncated than it is for the King and Prince William. And what the spokesperson also said, which was actually, I think revealing to a certain extent, was that they said that they did inform Royal Communications before the announcement was released as a quote-unquote courtesy to the Royal Communications team. So this means that maybe there's some sort of, at least very much, channels of communication are open between Prince Harry's communications team and Royal Communications team. However, I think we have to treat this, I don't want to say suspiciously, but again, his spokesperson kind of emphasizing going back to the security point, going back to the fact that Prince Harry was stripped of his security, kind of the undertones of that message, or kind of feel like, well, we were forced to do this because of the security. Again, kind of the undertones of Prince Harry maybe feeling a little bit hard done by. But it's exactly as you said, Earthshot Prize is the biggest cause possibly for the Prince of Wales. And this is one of his biggest events of the year, his biggest annual event. You know, he's going abroad and he's been greeted by enthusiastic crowds at the iconic Sugarloaf Mountain at the launch of this huge worldwide event. He's trying to set a massive precedent. And yet Prince Harry providing a distraction to that. And I don't think that's going to go down necessarily well in royal circles.
Josh Rom, royal commentator, thank you so much for your time. Brilliant to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Gabriella.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.